The story begins in a mansion where a boy dressed as a butler heads toward his mistress's room. Upon arriving at the door, he knocks to announce that he is coming in before opening it. Just as he enters the room, a girl named Eleanor pins him against the wall and asks where he has been calling him Arx. From this interaction, Arx is once again reminded that he has been reincarnated as a background character in an otome game and has somehow made the Yandere villainess fall head over heels for him. Celestia Kingdom is an otome game that became popular in Japan thanks to its many possible endings. Among its many characters, Eleonor is infamous for committing outrageous misdeeds. However, even in such a setting, the protagonist, who is now Arx Leoforth, does not appear by name in any of the game's story branches. This leads him to believe that he is merely a background character, which does not bother him. In these reincarnation in an otome game scenarios, it is common for the protagonist to use knowledge from their previous life to become unbeatable. However, Arx can hardly remember anything about his previous life. For some reason, he only remembers this game, though he also vaguely recalls that he used to live in a country called Japan. Moving on, since he has no family or relatives in this life, he lives a carefree life in an orphanage. He wonders why he was reincarnated here in the first place. He thinks that if he had been reincarnated as the main character, he might have gained some amazing magic and perhaps even experienced school life alongside the other characters. Despite that not being the case, he believes that even as a mere background character, there might still be some huge opportunities waiting for him somewhere out there. For now, however, he simply plans to enjoy this world. One day, Arx spars with a wooden sword and easily disarms his opponent. This results in his opponent's defeat, and Arx is announced as the winner of the match. His opponent, who is older than him, admits that Arx is incredibly skilled, while the people watching begin to cheer as this victory means that Arx has defeated all the adults in the village. A child then calls him amazing and asks whether he would also become stronger if he trained as hard as Arx. Arx replies that of course he can. In reality, however, Arx has only trained out of boredom since there are no online games for him to play. Despite being this strong, he has no intention of becoming a knight, so he believes his skills will only be useful for getting rid of monsters near the village. Just then, Arx is approached and congratulated by an old man who is the director of the orphanage. The director pats him on the shoulder and praises him, saying that he will make a fine knight. Arx points out that it is impossible for a commoner like him to become a knight, but the director insists that someone like Arx will definitely become one. He then comments on how he never imagined Arx would grow up to become so remarkable. With that said, the director adds that he actually has a favor to ask Arx, which leaves him confused. Later, Arx's heart beats rapidly with nervousness, as this is his first time being inside such a fancy mansion. Feeling completely out of place, he asks the director if they are really supposed to be there. The director explains that they have come because there is someone who wants to meet him. Just as they are talking, the person in question enters the room and introduces himself as Adalbert Ancinous, the count who governs the region. Shocked to learn that the man standing before him is a count, Arx nervously introduces himself as well. Count Adalbert then asks the director if Arx is the boy he was talking about. The director confirms that he is, adding that despite having some flaws, Arx is a truly capable child. With that, the count mentions hearing about Arx's achievements and explains that he has called him here to ask him for a very important favor. Just as Arx wonders what a high-ranking noble could possibly want from him, Count Adalbert asks him to become friends with his daughter, which leaves him shocked. While Arx is confused, Adalbert continues by revealing that his daughter has a troublesome nature. This makes Arx wonder what he means, and whether she has a truly bad personality or perhaps some strange illness. Suddenly, he recalls hearing the family name Ancinous somewhere before. However, before he can fully remember, Adalbert calls for his daughter Eleonor to come in. Eleonor Ancinous then enters the room, greets Arx, and introduces herself while he stares at her in shock. Upon hearing her name and seeing her appearance, he immediately recognizes her as the game's villainess who relentlessly harassed the protagonist out of sheer malice. Arx wonders if he is really expected to become friends with someone who is known as the root of all evil and the final boss of the game. While both he and Eleanor are nervous, Adalbert brings them closer together and, believing that they will make good friends, suggests that they talk for a while. With that, Eleanor and Arx begin walking through the garden. Arx comments on how wonderful the garden is, saying that it never gets boring no matter how many times he looks at it. Eleanor then bluntly replies that this is because the gardener maintains it regularly, which leaves Arx feeling a little awkward. Earlier, Adalbert had pointed out that Arx and Eleanor are the same age and asked whether he does not think she is cute. Although Arx is surprised by how expressionless someone his age can be, he agrees that she is cute as he has never seen such a beautiful girl with black hair and eyes before. He finds this unsurprising for one of the game's main characters, and even though she shows almost no emotion, he cannot help but feel captivated by her appearance. While he is thinking this, he notices that Eleanor has suddenly stopped walking, prompting him to ask whether something is wrong. When she does not respond, Arx approaches her and reaches out his hand, telling her that if she is not feeling well, they should return to the mansion immediately. Eleanor then replies that she believes he does not want to be friends with her, which confuses Arx. She continues by saying that she understands he does not want to associate with someone as accursed as her, but Arx quickly denies it. However, Eleanor tells him that it is fine and that he does not have to hide his true feelings because everyone else has felt the same way. People do not even care whether she can hear them or not, and they openly gossip about how going near her will bring misfortune. They also scrutinize her appearance, claiming that she must be a cursed child because of her black hair and the emptiness in her eyes. Since she is the daughter of a noble, some people had still tried to curry favor with her, but the moment they looked at her appearance, they became frightened. One person had even accidentally slapped her out of fear. After that incident, no one spoke to her anymore, and they only gave her fearful glances from a distance. Shocked by what he is hearing, Arx watches as Eleanor reaches toward a flower and explains that she has grown used to this treatment because she knows it is the proper way for people to react to her. Just then, Arx suddenly twitches in shock when the flower's color begins to darken without Eleanor even touching it, while a dark aura radiates from her. A tremendous amount of mana then rushes past Arx, leaving him stunned as he wonders whether this is Eleanor's magic. He has never seen anything on this level before. Eleanor tells him to see for himself, explaining that everything she touches loses its color. Eventually, everything withers and dies, plants and people alike. Arx softly calls her name, but Eleanor tells him that he simply does not understand. She is a cursed child, after all. Arx had never known that Eleanor had been forced to endure such treatment, which makes him wonder if this is the reason for her eventual demise. He begins to wonder whether he can save her and change her fate. He then recalls Adalbert's request and wonders if the reason he was reincarnated into this world could be connected to Eleanor. Realizing this, he decides to put the story back on track in his own way so that he can reach this world's happy ending. In order to do that, he realizes that he has to become close to her, which could help him avoid the bad ending. With the desire to create a future where no one ends up unhappy, Arx calls out her name and explains that he does not find her appearance creepy or feel even the slightest bit afraid of her. After saying this, he becomes flustered and adds that instead, he finds her unbelievably beautiful, which catches Eleanor completely off guard. Flustered, she expresses her appreciation for his kind words, but warns him that her power could end up hurting someone. Arx agrees that he cannot deny that possibility, but then adds that there must be a better way to use such power. He uses his magic to make the dead flower bloom again. While Eleanor is confused, Arx continues by saying that even if she ends up hurting someone, he will find a way to handle it. With that, he asks her if she would like to be his friend, leaving her completely speechless. The scene then shifts to Eleanor having a nightmare in which people call her a cursed child and a devil. As she wanders through the dark void desperately looking for someone to save her, she notices a dark figure whom she calls Mother and desperately clings to her, saying that she is scared. The figure then takes the form of her mother, but instead of comforting her, she gives Eleanor a cold and distant gaze. Confused, Eleanor looks at her as her mother coldly tells her not to look at her with those eyes, leaving her shocked. Devastated, Eleanor bursts into tears and repeatedly apologizes, even apologizing for being born. Just then, she is awakened from the nightmare by someone calling her name. The person is none other than Arx, who asks if she is okay because she seems to have been having a terrible nightmare. Still confused, Eleanor listens as Arx explains that they had been talking in her room earlier, but she fell asleep from exhaustion. He assumes that this must have been why she had the bad dream, but when she does not respond, he calls her name again. As she turns around, Arx notices the tears in her eyes, which shocks him. She then suddenly bursts into crying, shocking Arx even further. As she continues to cry, Arx has no idea what to do, so he hesitantly embraces her and gently pats her head. This seems to calm Eleanor down, reminding her that she now has a friend. Earlier, when Arx had asked her to be his friend, she had warned him that he would eventually become unhappy by being with someone like her. He had quickly denied this, saying that being with her would make him happy. Eleanor had then argued that she might end up hurting him as well, to which Arx had replied that nobody can go through life without ever hurting someone. As she squeezes the hem of her skirt and tells him that he would be better off with someone else, Arx grabs her shoulders and loudly calls her name. With a calm voice, he clearly expresses that he wants to be with her, surprising her with his determination. Seeing how sincere he is, Eleanor accepts his offer of friendship and asks him to take care of her. Back in the present, after calming down, Eleanor apologizes to Arx, but he tells her that she has nothing to apologize for and that his chest is always available whenever she needs someone to lean on. Hearing this, Eleanor laughs and says that Arx really is kind. He replies that he is simply doing what any friend would do. Eleanor then explains that she has never had anyone whom she could even call an ally, let alone a friend. Because of this, she wonders whether she can even live up to being a proper friend like Arx. Arx assures her that it is perfectly fine if she does not know how to be a good friend, as friendship can take many different forms, and he usually just does whatever feels right to him. He believes that if she makes more friends, she will naturally figure things out along the way. He adds that communication requires practice and repetition, which surprises Eleanor. As she smiles in amusement, Arx suggests that they take things slowly, reminding her that life is much, much longer than they realize. A few weeks later, Arx is left speechless when he realizes that Eleanor seems to have become completely obsessed with him. In the morning, she shows him the flowers she has managed to bloom using her magic. At noon, she offers him some pastries, and later the two of them look up at the sky together as Eleanor asks whether he thinks the view is beautiful. As Arx becomes lost in thought, wondering how Eleanor could have changed so dramatically, she repeatedly calls his name. Snapping out of his thoughts, he notices Eleanor asking whether he is even listening to her. Finding her reaction incredibly cute, Arx is secretly happy with how much she has changed. He apologizes and explains that he was simply lost in thought. Eleanor pouts and asks why he was distracted, then questions whether there is something more important than what she has to say. Arx quickly assures her that there is absolutely nothing more important. He takes her hands, and with an almost sparkling expression declares that there is nothing in the world more important to him than her. This catches Eleanor completely off guard, leaving her flustered. Arx is hardly surprised by her reaction, as he is already well aware of his own handsome appearance. Flustered, Eleanor tries to change the subject and asks what kind of clothes he likes. Just then, Adalbert knocks on the door and enters the room, announcing that he has something important to discuss with Arx. He apologizes to Eleanor for borrowing Arx, and as Arx walks toward him, he glances back and notices Eleanor's irritated expression. Annoyed, she says that it does not matter to her since Arx has been absent-minded for a while anyway, something he cannot deny. Before leaving, Arx leans closer to her and softly compliments her, telling her that whatever she wears looks beautiful on her. The unexpected compliment leaves Eleanor flustered, and Arx simply waves goodbye before leaving with Adalbert. Later, in Adalbert's office, the Count informs Arx that the request he made earlier has been approved. Hearing this, Arx asks if it has really been accepted, and Adalbert confirms that starting next week, Arx will officially become part of the Ancinous household. Arx thanks him for arranging everything, but Adalbert asks whether he is truly comfortable with the arrangement. Arx replies that living there will save him the trouble of commuting, and that he is already well suited for the job. Adalbert then offers to provide him with a comfortable place to stay, but Arx politely declines, saying that he has no intention of taking advantage of Adalbert's authority in any way. Hearing this, Adalbert finds Arx's way of thinking remarkably admirable for a 7-year-old. Arx suspects that Adalbert had already recognized this quality in him, and asks if that is the reason he was chosen to become Eleanor's friend. Pleased that Arx has understood the situation so well, Adalbert agrees that this was indeed one of the reasons. Arx promises to do his best, but he explains that there is one thing he wants to do first. Moments later, Arx arrives in front of Eleanor's room. Through the slightly open door, he can see that she is clearly angry. He knocks on the door and calls out her name. Eleanor turns around and angrily asks whether talking with her father is really that much fun. However, she suddenly stops mid-sentence when she sees him. Arx apologizes for being late and addresses her as Milady. Dressed in his new butler's attire, he kneels before her and formally introduces himself as her attendant from that day forward. A few years later, the Ancinous mansion is sparkling more than usual, as if it is preparing to host a grand banquet. That turns out to be exactly the case, as a busy maid rushes around after learning that there are not enough glasses for the celebration. She immediately orders someone to notify the supplier, while also receiving an update about the preparations in the main hall. Meanwhile, the person handling most of the preparations lets out an exhausted sigh, and that person is none other than Arx. It has been 3 years since he became a servant in the Ancinous household. Eleanor is about to turn 10, and in this world, reaching that age is an important milestone that is traditionally celebrated with an extravagant party. Because of this, everyone in the household is busy preparing for the celebration. Just as Arx is thinking about how this will be his first time attending a noble's party, a maid informs him that the preparations in the main hall have been completed. Arx thanks the maid named Nana, who points out that he looks tired. Arx considers the exhaustion to be expected, especially since the day of the celebration will be even more hectic. Nana agrees, but explains that thanks to him, they are completely prepared for tomorrow, which makes Arx glad to hear. Setting that aside, Arx finds it strange that despite being only 10 years old, he is overseeing almost the entire party. Not only that, but all the servants rely on him for even the smallest things. He wonders how things ended up this way when all he had done was offer some common-sense suggestions based on what he remembered from his previous life. Nana then praises him, saying that he is amazing because he not only comes up with great ideas, but also takes the initiative to put them into action himself. Arx replies that he is doing all of this for Eleanor, as this is their first extravagant celebration since they met. He wants to celebrate her birthday in a big way and see her delighted smile, making all the fatigue he feels seem insignificant. With that, Arx uses magic to create a stone sword. After quickly changing into casual clothes, he announces that he is going out to train, shocking Nana, who asks if he is not tired. Arx replies that he has already used healing magic on himself to revitalize his body. Before leaving, he tells Nana that they should do their best tomorrow, leaving her somewhat confused by his casual determination. A few moments later, Arx is about to finish his training for the day when someone calls out to him. The person turns out to be Eleanor, and Arx asks how long she has been standing there. She replies that she has been there for a while, which shocks him because he had not noticed her at all. He apologizes and nervously asks why she has been standing outside for so long, warning her that she will catch a cold. Eleanor then casually asks whether Arx would warm her up if that happened, catching him completely off guard. Arx recalls that there are spells capable of starting fires or raising someone's body temperature, but he also remembers that Eleanor possesses powers that could accomplish the same thing herself. Eleanor then points out that Arx has been so busy lately that he barely comes to see her anymore. Arx quietly mutters that they had only talked the other day, but Eleanor reminds him that he belongs to her. She then clarifies that since he is her servant, should he not always be by her side? Arx apologizes and says that he would love nothing more than to stay by her side, but he is simply far too busy with the preparations. After putting on his gloves, he takes her hand and kisses it while explaining that everything he has been doing is for tomorrow, so they can give her a magnificent celebration. Flustered by the gesture, Eleanor tries to hide her embarrassment by accepting his explanation and saying that it cannot be helped since tomorrow is an important day. Arx then suggests that they go inside because it is cold, but Eleanor suddenly stops and asks whether he is not lonely. Arx bluntly replies that he is not lonely at all, as Adalbert and all the other servants have always treated him kindly. Annoyed because that is not the answer she was looking for, Eleanor begins walking away with exaggerated steps and tells him to take care of everything tomorrow. Wondering if he has somehow done something wrong, Arx follows after her. When Eleanor suddenly sneezes, he immediately uses his magic to warm her up. The next day, everything is prepared perfectly for the party, especially the main hall, which sparkles beautifully under the lights. Moments later, Adalbert stands in the interior gallery and thanks everyone for gathering to celebrate the occasion. He then mentally calls out to Arx, telling him to eliminate any pests who try to get close to Eleonor. Arx somehow understands the hidden message from Adalbert's expression, accepts the task, and glances toward two boys standing nearby. Just as he is thinking that he feels like he has seen them somewhere before, one of the boys notices his gaze, causing Arx to quickly look away. Wondering if they have noticed him staring, he cautiously looks back, only to find that the two boys have already disappeared. Just then, the star of the celebration, Eleonor, is announced as she enters the hall wearing a beautiful outfit that immediately catches everyone's attention. Even Arx is mesmerized by her beauty and cannot seem to take his eyes off her. Eleonor notices him among the servants and smiles at him, prompting Arx to smile back. She then walks toward the interior gallery with Nana accompanying her, after which the banquet officially begins with a lady performing an aria. Arx cannot help but admire how incredible Eleonor looks, finding it amazing how much she has changed in just 3 years from the gloomy girl she once was. He does find it unfortunate that he cannot remain by her side at the moment because he is responsible for overseeing the entire celebration. Just as he is thinking this, Nana quietly calls his name from a nearby room. Noticing her, Arx quickly rushes over and asks whether something is wrong since she is supposed to be guarding Eleonor. Nana tries to explain the situation but struggles to put it into words, leaving Arx confused. Later, Arx finds himself seated beside Eleonor in a ceremonial chair identical to hers, leaving him wondering how things have somehow come to this. He can feel the noble's eyes drilling into him as they silently wonder who he is. Noticing how nervous he looks, Eleonor asks if he is okay because he looks pale. Arx replies by asking whose fault she thinks it is, causing her to pout. She explains that Arx is supposed to be her attendant, but he is never by her side, which is why she had this arrangement made. Arx argues that even so, there is no reason for a mere servant to sit beside the guest of honor. Eleonor firmly clarifies that Arx is not just any servant. Although he finds her words kind, he asks what the guests will think. She ignores his concern and with a slight blush adds that Arx deserves to be celebrated as well, which leaves him confused. Eleanor then asks whether he is the same age as her. When Arx confirms that he is, she points out that despite being the same age, no one is celebrating his birthday. Hearing this, Arx recalls that he has never had anyone properly celebrate his birthday because he does not even know his actual date of birth. He finally realizes what Eleanor means and understands that she has arranged for him to sit beside her as an equal guest. Realizing how kind her heart truly is, Arx feels deeply touched. He is genuinely happy to see how much the girl who was once so pessimistic has grown, making him certain that there is no way she could ever become the final boss of the game now. Arx then tells her that while it is an honor to be here, simply having her celebrate his birthday is more than enough to make him happy. His sincere smile leaves Eleanor flustered once again as she tries to tell him that she wants to do something with him after the celebration. Meanwhile, Arx is already thinking about making sure the party goes smoothly, knowing that everything he does now could affect Eleanor's future. As he considers this, He recalls the two familiar boys who disappeared earlier and hopes that nothing troublesome happens. Moments later, as they are served food, Eleanor clings to Ark's arm while holding a spoon in her other hand and asks if he has tried the dish. Arx becomes visibly nervous because the other nobles are staring at him intensely. Just as he tells Eleanor to wait a moment, a boy approaches them. The boy greets Eleanor and asks her to dance with him, immediately reminding Arx of one of the boys he saw earlier. More importantly, after getting a closer look at him, Arx recognizes him from the game. His name is Razor Killman, the son of a viscount. Since Razor is much younger than he was when the game originally began, Arx had been unable to recognize him at first. In the game, Razor has a foul mouth and a violent personality, but he is extremely devoted to the protagonist, which makes him a very popular character. Razor arrogantly asks Eleanor if she did not hear him say that he is going to dance with her. However, she flatly refuses, shocking him. Razor asks why she would refuse him, and Eleonor simply replies by asking whether it is not obvious. She has not felt even the slightest desire to dance with him. Just as she is about to explain that she already has someone to dance with, Razor becomes annoyed by her response and angrily swings his hand toward her, demanding to know how she dares to refuse him. Before his hand can reach her, Arx catches it and glares at him, shocking Razor. When Razor demands to know what the hell he is doing, Arx introduces himself as Eleanor's attendant. Razor immediately tells him to know his place, but Arx tightens his grip and calmly declares that his job is to protect Eleanor and that he intends to fulfill his duty. Razor calls his reaction ridiculous, insisting that he is only asking her to dance and nothing more. Arx suggests that he calm down, explaining that if the situation escalates, it will only bring shame upon his family. Enraged, Razor asks why that would be the case. Arx then explains that if the son of a viscount were to harm the daughter of a higher-ranking noble or her servant, he does not think that would be considered a minor problem. Hearing this, Razor suddenly sighs, surprising Arx. Arx realizes that Razor is not an idiot, but merely a spoiled brat, so he tells him that if he withdraws now, Arx will not report the incident to his master. Razor agrees, saying that it is fine. Satisfied with his response, Arx releases his hand, but Razor suddenly smirks. Without warning, he tackles Arx to the ground. When Arx asks what he is doing, Razor punches him in the face. However, the attack barely affects Arx, who simply finds the situation troublesome and wonders if this guy is actually serious. Razor angrily demands to know how Arx dares to disgrace him and throws another punch. Before it can land, Arx uses sleep magic to knock him unconscious. He then quickly calls for Nanai and asks her to bring Lord Killman and Count Adalbert. Nanai accepts and immediately goes to carry out his request. Moments later, Arx hands Razor over to the other servants so they can take care of him. Eleanor then calls out to Arx, and he immediately asks if she is hurt. Instead, she tells him to worry about himself and asks whether he is all right while touching his bruised face. She comments that the bruise looks swollen, but Arx brushes it off as nothing serious and uses healing magic to restore himself. He then sincerely says that he is simply glad she is safe, leaving Eleanor stunned. As another passing servant asks Arx if he is all right, he assures them that he is fine and immediately offers to help with their work. Eleanor watches him with concern as he walks away to assist the servant. Moments later, Razor's brother kneels before Arx and sincerely apologizes for his brother's behavior. Surprised to see a noble performing a doja, Arx quickly tells him not to worry and asks him to raise his head. The man is Caesar Killman, Razor's older brother and one of the love interests in the game. In the game, Caesar consistently ranks near the top of the popularity polls because of his gentle, soft-spoken prince archetype. Caesar apologizes once again while Arx sympathizes with him, believing that having such a troublesome little brother must be difficult. Caesar explains that because Razor has been spoiled rotten, he seems to operate under the assumption that he is entitled to anything he wants. Hearing this, Arx sarcastically thinks that Razor behaves like a grade schooler before realizing that technically he actually is one. After explaining what led to the incident, Arx asks Caesar what will happen to Razor now. Caesar explains that while much depends on Count Adalbert's decision, exile is the least Razor can expect. Arx is surprised to hear this and excitedly asks if he really means exile. However, he quickly realizes that he has become far too excited upon hearing a word he has only ever encountered in fantasy stories, and his reaction becomes obvious. Although Arx is only 10 years old in this world, he understands that his age is considered relatively mature, so he feels that Razor's punishment is somewhat fair. More importantly, Arx realizes that this incident has officially closed Razor Killman's route from the original game. This makes him wonder whether the world is beginning to diverge from the game's original storyline. If that is truly the case, he can only hope that the changes will also alter Eleanor's fate for the better. Later, Arx enters Eleanor's room, where she immediately asks whether everything is okay because he has been gone for such a long time. With a smile, Arx assures her that everything is perfectly fine and explains that there were witnesses, so there is nothing to worry about. He adds that the reason it took so long is simply because everyone involved kept apologizing to him for a while. Relieved by this explanation, Eleanor lets out a sigh of relief. Arx then apologizes, believing that he ended up ruining her birthday party. Eleanor, however, angrily asks why he is apologizing, insisting that the fault lies entirely with that bandit of a boy and his outrageous behavior. Arx still believes that he should have been able to prevent the incident from happening in the first place and admits that he was too naive. He realizes that if he had remembered Razor sooner or properly checked the guest list, he could have had him removed before the invitation was even sent. Eleanor suddenly calls his name and grabs his face with both hands, startling him. She then tells him that as long as she has Arx, she does not care about anyone else. However, she immediately realizes what she has said and becomes embarrassed, quickly changing the subject by saying that they do not know whether the party is truly ruined yet. Confused by her sudden change in topic, Arx listens as she reaches for the door and asks if he would like to go outside with her for a while. He accepts her request, and the two later step outside together. Arx then asks whether Eleanor managed to dance with anyone during the party. She replies that she did not dance with anyone because she turned down every person who asked her. This confuses Arx, especially because dancing is an important part of noble society. It is meant to give nobles an opportunity to find suitable partners and forge connections, making it an essential part of their social world. Arx therefore asks why she would refuse everyone. Flushing, Eleanor finally admits that she wants her first dance to be with Arx. The confession catches him completely off guard. When Arx asks if she means she wants to dance with him, Eleanor explains that she had wanted to ask him the previous day, but could not find the courage to do so. Hearing this, Arx realizes that this is the reason she had been acting strangely the previous day. He then asks whether she is really comfortable dancing with someone like him, admitting that he has never danced before. Eleanor replies that it is fine because she is not very good at dancing either. More importantly, she points out with a delighted smile that no one will see them here, not even the moon. Arx agrees, reasoning that even if they make a mistake, there will be nothing to be embarrassed about. Eleanor adds that even if he trips, she will be the only one who sees it. With that, she calls Arx by his full name and asks if he would do her the honor of taking her hand. He accepts, saying that the honor is his. The two then begin dancing together in the garden beneath the starry sky, with no moon in sight. Moments later, Arx returns to the main hall and is immediately surrounded by nobles asking him to become a servant in their households and offering to let him name his price. The nobles are impressed by the way Arx stood his ground against the heir of the Killmound family, and they are even more amazed by his precision and magical abilities. Arx understands why they are trying to recruit him, but before he can reject their offers, he tries to calm them down. However, he suddenly notices several boys approaching Eleanor, and she appears to be getting overwhelmed by their attention. Arx quickly refuses all the nobles' proposals, explaining that he is Eleanor's servant before leaving them behind. He then moves behind Eleanor, startling the boys enough that they quickly walk away. Confused by their sudden departure, Eleanor looks back and notices Arx standing behind her, which immediately makes her happy. Just like that, the birthday party eventually comes to an end, leaving Arx thinking that he can finally take it easy. However, he completely forgets that a party involves not only preparation, but also cleanup, which he is responsible for overseeing as well. As he wonders whether they can even finish everything before midnight, he hopes that he can get an easier position the next time. Moments later, Nana informs him that the venue cleanup is already complete, shocking Arx because he cannot believe they have finished so quickly. Nanai explains that everyone was inspired by Arx giving the preparations his all, so they decided to give their best effort as well. Arx realizes that this is the reason the cleanup was completed so quickly, though he admits that hearing it makes him feel a little embarrassed. Nanai then points out that Eleonor enjoyed herself, which makes all their effort worthwhile. Arx confidently agrees, knowing that everything they did was worth it if Eleonor had a good time. Nanai then says that watching Arx reminds her of something from her childhood. When Arx asks what she means, she explains that she once helped organize a childhood friend's 10th birthday party when they were young. Since they were both orphans, they could only afford a modest celebration. At the time, all Nanai had wanted was to give her friend even a small reason to smile. Seeing Arx put so much effort into making Eleonor happy reminds her of the person she used to be. She then asks him if he wouldn't say that the two of them are also somewhat like childhood friends. For some reason, his voice trembles slightly as he repeats the words childhood friend, leaving him confused by his own reaction. Nanai explains that this is why watching them makes her feel a little nostalgic, but Arx cannot shake the feeling that something is wrong. He begins wondering about Eleanor's position as his childhood friend and whether someone like that had even existed in the original game. Considering that his own existence is already an irregularity in this timeline, it would not be strange for him to occupy such a role. Even so, he cannot understand why the thought makes him feel so uneasy. He is then snapped out of his thoughts when Nanai calls his name. She asks if he is all right because he seems distracted, and Arx replies that he was simply lost in thought for a moment. Believing that he is exhausted, Nanai suggests that he go to bed early. Before she can leave, another maid asks for her help. Nanai smiles and says that she is going to give everything one final push before calling it a day. Arx agrees and realizes that he also has to finish his remaining work. Moments later, Arx dashes toward Eleanor's room. After finishing all his tasks, he had accidentally fallen asleep when he was supposed to visit her once the cleanup was finished. He worries that she will be upset with him for an entire week because of it. Suddenly, a shiver runs down his spine. Startled, he quickly looks around, but there appears to be nothing there, making him wonder if he simply imagined it. Moving on, he quickly knocks on Eleanor's door, announces that it is him, and apologizes for being late. When she does not respond, he wonders if she has already fallen asleep and decides that he will apologize again tomorrow morning. However, just as he begins walking away, a shadowy vein-like appendage suddenly grabs him by the leg and drags him inside the room. The attack happens so quickly that Arx is left in shock, wondering what the hell just happened. More importantly, now that he is inside Eleanor's room, he repeatedly calls out her name in concern, wondering where she is and whether she is okay. Suddenly, he hears footsteps approaching. Although he wants to react, his body refuses to move. He shuts his eyes and struggles to get himself back on his feet when Eleanor quietly calls out his name. Hearing her voice, Arx opens his eyes and sees Eleanor standing before him with the dark, shadowy power he had just encountered emanating from her. Shocked by the sight, he also notices the cold expression on her face and calls out her name in confusion. However, in her usual blunt manner, Eleanor simply tells him that he is late, leaving Arx even more confused. She then has him sit down on the couch where a table filled with sweets is waiting in front of him. Eleanor explains that she prepared them because he has been working non-stop and barely eating. She tells him to eat, but after a brief pause, Arx points out that if he eats sweets this late at night, Nanai will scold him. Eleanor replies that if that is the case, he can consider her his partner in crime. She then holds a sweet close to his mouth, intending to feed him, leaving Arx wondering how things have somehow come to this. Instead of eating it, Arx calls out her name. Eleanor mistakenly assumes that he is refusing the food and assures him that it is still her birthday, so Nanai will not be that angry. However, That is not why Arx calls her name. He asks what that strange magic was that she just used. Hearing his question, Eleanor's expression becomes serious and she asks him to make her some tea. Arx agrees and moves to prepare it. While he makes the tea from a safer distance, Eleanor once again manifests the shadowy dark fine like magic. She explains that this is her Celestia. Arx knows that a Celestia is a unique form of magic bestowed upon each person. From what he remembers, every individual receives their own unique Celestia, which only they can wield. It is one of the key features that shaped and enriched the world of Celestia Kingdom. Although Arx asks when she awakened it, he already knows what her Celestia is capable of. He had seen her use this power countless times in the game scenes where she committed all sorts of atrocities. Even so, seeing it in real life and right in front of him has a completely different effect. Arx cannot help but shudder at the sight, causing Eleanor to apologize and explain that she did not mean to frighten him. She tells him that she awakened the power a month ago when she woke up one morning and found it already pouring out of her. Shocked to learn that she has had the power for that long, Arx asks why she never told him. Eleanor explains that she was afraid he would come to hate her if he knew. Arx quickly denies that possibility. However, after seeing how terrifying the power truly is, he finally understands why people had called Eleanor the cursed child. She then tries to lighten the mood by saying that the power is actually quite useful because she can use it to carry things around. However, her expression soon turns gloomy and she falls silent. She reveals that when Arx was pushed down earlier, she ended up releasing a little of her power. However, before the situation could get any worse, she flinches upon noticing the other noble's hostile stares. From this, she finally comes to believe that she truly is a cursed child. No matter how hard she tries to overcome it, this accursed power continues to follow her. Because of this, she becomes certain that Arx will eventually leave her, too. Before Arx can assure her that he would never do such a thing, Eleanor repeats the same words she had heard before, revealing that the person who had once said them to her and then disappeared was her mother. Hearing this, Arx recalls that Eleanor's mother was never shown in the game. Moreover, throughout all the time he has spent in this world, Eleanor has never once mentioned her mother. Eleanor continues by explaining that although she could not control her magic at the time, her mother had held her close when everyone else had rejected her. However, by the time Eleanor turned 5, even her mother had disappeared. She later learned that her mother had returned to her own family's home. Because of this, Eleanor believes that her mother probably has no intention of ever meeting her again, leaving Arx shocked. He finally realizes that the gloomy eyes Eleanor had when they first met had been hiding an enormous amount of pain. There is no denying that she carries deep emotional scars in her heart. Eleanor tries to assure Arx that everything is fine because this is simply her fate, and anyone would eventually leave her. Although Arx cannot undo the fact that her mother abandoned her, he wants to accept Eleanor exactly as she is and prevent her from falling into darkness. He grabs her shoulders and firmly calls her name. After a brief pause, he tells her that there is no way being hated can be her fate. He admits that her Celestia may frighten people and that some careless individuals may even condemn her because of it. Even so, he promises that he will continue holding her hand no matter what happens. His words leave Eleanor stunned. A silence follows and Arx begins to feel nervous, wondering if he has said something too dramatic or accidentally come across as creepy. Eleanor then wonders aloud if she really is hopeless, leaving Arx confused before she lets out a small chuckle. Wiping away her tears, she reveals that she had actually been hoping Arx would say something like that. Hearing this, Arx feels relieved and happy. He places his hand against her face and tells her that he will say it as many times as necessary, because he genuinely means it. With that, he embraces her, determined to protect her both as her friend and as her servant. However, just as he thinks of himself as her childhood friend as well, something suddenly clicks in his mind. He begins wondering why Eleanor had fallen into darkness in the original story and whether it had truly been caused by the discrimination she suffered. As he starts connecting the pieces and internally insists that it cannot be that simple, Eleanor quietly says that one thing has become clear to her from their conversation. with darkness filling her eyes. She says that if Arx were to leave her, she might completely fall apart. The statement shocks him. She then adds that she cannot even imagine the horror of him being gone, prompting Arx to firmly tell her not to joke about something like that. In that exact moment, everything finally falls into place for Arx. He remembers why Eleonor became the villainess in the original game. It had been clearly stated in her character introduction that her descent into darkness was caused by the tragic loss of someone close to her. Arx realizes that he is that person. If everything continues along this path, he will likely die within the next 5 years before he turns 15 and before the events of the game begin. His death would then become the event that drives Eleonor into darkness and turns her into the villainess he remembers. Noticing that Arx has become lost in thought, Eleonor calls out to him. When he snaps back to reality, she asks whether she can truly believe everything he has said. Arx confirms that she can, but deep inside, he can feel the ominous power within her writhing as though it is warning him that he will eventually betray her. Determined to avoid this fate, Arx begins training vigorously so that he can stay alive. As he asks for one more sparring match with his training partner, the man asks if he is serious, pointing out that Arx is already covered in cuts. Arx simply replies that he is fine. Clenching his sword tightly, he reminds himself that there is no time to waste. He has 5 years left, perhaps even less, and by then he plans to become the strongest. A few days later, while Arx is going through his usual sword training, his sparring partner, a knight named Galtz, suggests that they take a break. Arx insists that he is fine and can continue, but Galtz clarifies that this is not the reason he wants to stop. As he says this, Eleonor is shown standing nearby with a serious expression. Galtz explains that every time he knocks Arx down, Eleanor's glare becomes increasingly intense. Arx is shocked and wonders when she appeared. Now that he understands the reason, Galtz once again says that they are taking a break. This time Arx agrees and immediately runs toward Eleonor. He tells her that she could have simply called out to him, but she replies that she did not want to get in his way while he was working so hard. Since she is visiting him at this hour, Arx asks about her lessons with Nanai. Eleonor replies that they have already ended. She then leans closer and tells him that he is welcome to praise her. Hearing this, Arx smiles and quickly puts on his gloves before patting her head and calling her amazing. Eleonor responds with a happy grin. Ever since the night Arx realized that he is the person whose death causes Eleonor to fall into darkness, he has been working tirelessly to prevent that fate. Before discovering the truth, he had believed that he had successfully shifted the story away from its original path. However, he now realizes that he has not managed to change anything important. If things continue this way and he dies as he is destined to, Eleonor will truly become the heartless person from the original story. That transformation will eventually lead to her cruel death as the game's final boss. That is the one fate Arx desperately wants to prevent. Because of this, he had even considered deliberately pushing Eleonor away so that she would eventually hate him instead. However, seeing her standing before him and happily holding his hand while asking him to pat her head more, he realizes that deliberately pushing her away would be even more terrifying. Although he is overjoyed that she has become so attached to him, he absolutely does not want to die the death of Eleanor's childhood friend. In the end, he has no choice but to become the strongest person he can and survive. While Arx is lost in thought, Eleonor stares at him before finally pointing out that he has been acting strangely lately. Arx is caught off guard because he cannot deny it. There is no way he can simply tell her that he is destined to die in a few years, and that his death will turn her into a villainess. Before he can come up with an excuse, Galtz asks Eleonor to cut Arx some slack, explaining that Arx is simply preparing to show her how strong he has become during the trials. For some reason, Arx's heart suddenly begins pounding upon hearing those words. When Eleonor asked whether that is true, Galtz confirms it, saying that Arx has been especially fired up ever since turning 10. Noticing Arx's strange reaction, Eleonor calls out to him, but he does not respond. She then asks if he is okay because he looks pale. Arx apologizes and says that he has suddenly remembered something urgent that he needs to take care of before quickly leaving Eleonor worried. As he heads toward his room, Arx internally panics while realizing how serious the situation is and wondering how he could have forgotten something so important. He finally realizes that the event where he is most likely to die is the ritual of trials. It is a ceremony in which children of a certain age venture into a dungeon to test their abilities and courage. Since they are only 10 years old, their safety is normally guaranteed, but if anything irregular happens, that protection may not be enough. Realizing this, Arx desperately wonders what he can do to ensure that he does not die. There is no way he will simply accept his fate, and he refuses to die. From that day onward, Arx intensifies his studies and training even further while also taking additional magic lessons, determined to prepare himself for whatever awaits him. A few weeks later, on the day before the trial, Arx worries that there may also be poisonous creatures lurking inside the dungeon. He wonders whether, despite everything he has done up until now, he will still die tomorrow. He wishes he at least knew how he is going to die because the uncertainty feels unbearably unfair. He begins wondering what kind of death would be enough to drive Eleonor into darkness and questions how the original Arx had actually died. The next day, Arx and Eleonor enter the dungeon together. Eleonor explains that they only need to reach the heart of the forest to pass the trial, and Arx confirms that this is correct. Hearing this, Eleonor trembles slightly in fear. Arx then holds her hand and assures her that he will protect her, to which she asks if he isn't scared as well. In reality, he is even more terrified than she is. Ever since he learned that he was destined to die here, he has been living in fear. Since he cannot simply tell her the truth, he instead tells her that he is much more afraid of something happening to her. Hearing this, Eleanor's heart skips a beat. She then clings to his arm and asks whether she can count on him if anything happens. Slightly flustered, Arx assures her that she can before focusing on the path ahead. He has done everything he can up until this point, so now he has no choice but to believe in himself. With that, the two begin venturing deeper into the dungeon toward its heart. Deep within the forest stands a massive rock known as the Sacred Stone, and the objective of this year's trial is to claim one of its fragments independently. Along the way, Arx notices several guards trying to hide behind the bushes while making audible rustling noises. Noticing their lack of stealth, he assumes they are likely inexperienced rookies. Although powerful monsters do not normally appear in this forest, the safety of the noble children is guaranteed by more than 10 guards stationed throughout the area. Eleonor then asks Arx if he has noticed anything. He replies that it is probably just his imagination. She asks if he thinks so because she has felt as though someone has been watching her for a while. Arx is impressed by her sharp intuition, which is exactly what he would expect from her. He reassures her that everything is fine because he will protect her. Hearing this, Eleonor quickly clings to his arm and tells him that she is counting on him. Arx then silently tells the hidden guards to do their best not to get noticed. The guards are overjoyed that their hiding places have not been discovered and secretly raise a sign thanking Arx. Just then, Arx and Eleonor hear a rustling sound coming from a nearby bush. Arx immediately takes a fighting stance, wondering whether it is the guards moving around or the monster that is supposed to kill him. Instead, a cute rabbit-like creature with a single horn emerges from the bushes. Arx identifies the creature as an almirage. Eleonor asks whether he is going to kill it, and Arx confirms that he is, explaining that although it looks cute, it is actually a bloodthirsty little monster. As soon as he says this, the creature's expression changes from adorable to hostile before it launches itself toward Eleonor. Before it can harm her, Arx swiftly slashes it with his sword, effortlessly defeating the creature. Eleonor asks if it is really over, noting that there does not seem to be any blood. Arx explains that he used a technique that cuts the target internally, which is why there is no blood on the outside. Eleonor looks saddened by the sight, commenting that the creature had been bouncing around so lively only moments earlier. Arx asks if she is sad about it, and Eleonor admits that she is saddened by its death, but also understands that it could not be helped. Taking a life is sometimes unavoidable in order to survive, and that is one of the lessons the ritual of trials is meant to teach. Arx feels proud that Eleonor has grown enough to understand something like this. Eleonor then continues, asking whether it is not sad whenever something as cute as that creature dies. Arx agrees with her. However, Eleanor then adds in a darker tone that if she could, she would keep creatures like that locked away somewhere safe. Her sudden change in tone catches Arx off guard. Just as quickly she returns to her usual self and says that they should get going, taking the lead as they continue forward. Arx follows behind her, but he cannot shake the feeling that something is slightly off. He wonders whether he is simply imagining things. A few moments later, they finally reach the sacred stone. Arx suggests that they scrape off a fragment immediately, and they quickly place a small piece of the stone inside a vial. With that, they have officially completed their objective, causing Eleanor to sigh in relief. Seeing how exhausted she is, Arx suggests that they take a short break. However, before they can rest, he suddenly hears shouting from behind them. A group of 3 boys has also managed to reach the sacred stone, and they initially mistake Arx and Eleanor for commoners participating in the trial alongside them. As they approach, however, one of the boys recognizes Arx as the person his mother and the other nobles had taken an interest in. The boy then complains that because of Arx, he had gotten yelled at. Arx is confused by the accusation, but he soon remembers seeing a boy being scolded earlier and realizes that this may be the same person. Another boy in the group then recognizes Eleanor and calls her the Crow Girl. The 3 boys begin gossiping, with one asking whether she is really the Crow Girl his mother and the others had been talking about, implying that she must be a noble. Before they can say anything else, Arx glares at them. His intimidating stare makes all 3 boys flinch, and they immediately run away while shouting that the Crow Girl is going to kill them. Arx becomes annoyed and decides that he should teach them a lesson. However, Eleanor stops him by grabbing his shirt and asks whether he is bothered by what they said about her. She assures him that there is no need to worry because she has already grown used to this sort of treatment. Arx is surprised by her maturity and realizes that knowing her eventual fate has made him somewhat overprotective of her. Seeing that Eleanor has grown stronger as well makes him feel somewhat relieved. Eleanor then adds that, aside from all of that, as long as Arx acknowledges her, that is all that matters to her. Hearing this, Arx once again wonders whether she has really matured at all. Meanwhile, Galtz and another knight assigned to protect Arx and Eleanor are walking nearby. The other knight points out that having guards accompany Arx seems unnecessary. Galtz agrees, but explains that Arx had specifically and desperately asked him to make sure he could respond immediately if anything happened, so he could not simply ignore the request. The other knight feels somewhat underwhelmed because nothing has happened so far, but Galtz suddenly notices a set of footprints that he does not recognize. Although the other knight points out that they could belong to the commoner children, Galtz decides to contact the scouts farther ahead just to be safe. The other knight remarks that Galtz is being overly serious and that the footprints are probably nothing. However, as the 2 knights walk away, a shadowy figure suddenly appears behind them. Meanwhile, near the sacred stone, Arx notices that the other participants are gradually arriving one after another. Since he and Eleanor have already accomplished their objective, he suggests that they head back. Just then, a boy comes running toward them and urgently says that something is wrong. When Arx asks what happened, the boy explains that the friend who had been with him only moments earlier has disappeared. He says that while they were on their way to the sacred stone, his friend suddenly began muttering strange things and repeatedly saying the word home. Creeped out by his friend's behavior, the boy had run away and left him behind. However, the boy then realizes that perhaps his friend became frightened and decided to go home, so he may have run back toward the entrance. When he looks in that direction, he notices his friend surrounded by several armed adults. Hearing this, Arx assumes they may be guards from the Ancina's family. He thinks that perhaps the guards found the boy behaving strangely and took him somewhere safe, so he decides to go and check. Eleonor calls out to him worriedly. Arx tells her that he will go find the boy's friend and asks her to stay there for a while. Eleonor turns her face away and sulks, making Arx understand that she feels uneasy about being left alone. He gently kisses the back of her hand and promises that he will return soon. Eleonor reluctantly agrees and tells him to be careful. Arx assures her that he will before leaving. Moments later, Arx wanders through the forest calling out to the guards and identifying himself so they will know it is him. However, no one responds. Arx finds this strange because the guards are supposed to be watching over them from nearby. He looks around but finds neither the guards nor anyone else, leaving him to wonder where everyone has gone. He considers the possibility that they missed each other because the guards went to escort the lost child back to the entrance. If that is the case, he wonders whether he should simply return to Eleonor. However, when he looks around, he suddenly realizes that the area seems completely unfamiliar. The surroundings are nothing like the place he had been standing in moments earlier, leaving him confused about how he ended up there. Meanwhile, the boy who had asked Arx for help asks Eleonor whether Arx will be all right. Eleonor confidently replies that he will be fine. She adds that Arx is an incredible person because even when they encountered monsters along the way, he handled them calmly. More importantly, Arx had promised that he would return no matter what. As Eleonor reassures the boy that there is no reason to worry, she notices him giggling. She asks what he finds so funny, and the boy replies that she really cares about Arx, doesn't she? Eleonor is shocked and asks what he means. The boy then says that the two of them must be very close friends. Hearing this, Eleonor becomes flustered because she cannot deny that they are. Setting the subject aside, the boy apologizes for dragging them into this mess. Eleonor assures him that it is fine, although she continues thinking about just how close Arx has become to her. Meanwhile, Arx finds himself in a completely unfamiliar location. He tells himself to remain calm and decides to investigate the area first. He refuses to believe that this is simply the result of his poor sense of direction and wonders whether some kind of illusion or magical barrier is responsible. However, he quickly recalls that there should not be any monster in this forest capable of using magic powerful enough to create something like this. As he begins worrying about whether Eleonor is safe, he suddenly notices something nearby. It appears to be a boy. Arx wonders whether he has found the missing child and approaches him asking if he is lost. However, Arx is utterly shocked when the boy turns around and reveals that he is not human at all. Half of his body appears to be made of shadow. Arx immediately backs away as the creature's entire body transforms into a mass of darkness. He quickly fires a spell at it, completely dispersing the shadow covering its head. Yet to his horror, the darkness rapidly gathers itself back together, reforming the creature's head as if nothing had happened. The creature suddenly lunges at Arx and swings its claw-like hand at him. Arx barely manages to dodge the attack, but the force behind it leaves him stunned when he sees the tree behind him sliced cleanly in half. He quickly draws his sword and prepares to fight, wondering why a monster this powerful has appeared in a forest that should only be inhabited by weak creatures. As Arx continues dodging the creature's attacks and striking back with his sword, he quickly realizes that the monster is much stronger than he expected. The two of them appear to be evenly matched, but Arx knows that allowing the battle to turn into a war of attrition would be dangerous. He decides to end the fight as quickly as possible. With that in mind, he prepares Grand Blaze, an extremely powerful attack spell that was even considered formidable in the game. Enshrouding his blade in flames, Arx swiftly slices through the creature's neck, severing its head. He turns around to see whether the attack was successful and finds the monster's shadowy body engulfed in flames. Under normal circumstances, there is no way something could survive an attack like that. Yet, Arx has an uneasy feeling that the strike did not land properly. The shadowy head begins muttering something that sounds as though it is asking whether it is finally going home. Suddenly, an intense wave of scorching wind erupts from the creature's body, forcing Arx to shield his face as he struggles to keep his eyes open. When the wind finally settles, the monster's shadowy body has disappeared. Arx wonders whether it has actually been defeated. However, before he can investigate, someone suddenly grabs him from behind and locks his neck in a hold. Arx reaches for his sword and looks back in confusion, only to discover that the people restraining him are none other than the guards of the Ancina's family. One of the guards raises his sword, seemingly preparing to strike Arx. He quickly casts Grand Blaze to break free from their grip. Since there is no reason for the Ancina's guards to suddenly turn against him, Arx wonders whether they are being controlled by someone. Just as he considers this possibility, the dark, shadowy creature suddenly reappears, continuing to mutter about going home. Realizing that it is still alive, Arx wonders whether the creature is responsible for controlling the guards. He suspects that the monster may possess an incredibly powerful hypnosis spell capable of manipulating other people. Since his flames clearly have little effect on it, Arx quickly casts Windblade. However, the shadowy creature effortlessly dodges the attack. Arx is shocked that it can react so quickly, but before he can do anything else, the creature swiftly rushes past him. At first, Arx wonders whether it is simply trying to escape. However, when he looks in the direction it is heading, his expression changes. He realizes that the creature is heading directly toward Eleonor. Meanwhile, near the sacred stone, the boy tells Eleonor that Arx is a kind person because he went to look for his missing friend despite not even knowing him. Eleonor agrees, admitting that Arx is kind, perhaps even too kind to people other than her. She quietly adds the last part so the boy cannot hear her. The boy then says that his own friend is also very kind, mentioning something that happened only the other day. However, he suddenly stops mid-sentence. His eyes widen in confusion as he asks who his friend was. Eleanor asks whether they were not together only a short while ago. The boy confirms that they were, but for some reason he can no longer remember his friend's face or even his name. Hearing this, Eleanor develops an ominous feeling and quietly mutters Arx's name. Just then, another child enters the area. The others ask where he has been because everyone has been looking for him. The boy accompanying Eleanor identifies the newcomer as his missing friend, the same child Arx had gone to find. However, Eleanor notices that Arx is nowhere to be seen. The boy approaches his friend and tells him that he was worried about him, but the other boy does not respond. Instead, he silently reaches out his hand. Just as the boy is about to take it, Arx suddenly appears and shouts for him not to touch the stranger. In the next instant, the boy's friend reveals his true form as the shadowy monster. Arx swiftly kicks the creature away before it can make contact. The monster crashes into the sacred stone, causing the massive structure to split apart and shocking all the children nearby. Arx realizes how fortunate he is to have arrived just in time. He immediately orders everyone to run, telling them to get as far away as possible. However, when the children see the shadowy monster, they become too terrified to even run. Arx finds the situation incredibly frustrating. He wants to help guide the evacuation, but the presence of the monster makes it nearly impossible. Arx once again attacks the creature with Grand Blaze, but this time it effortlessly dodges the spell and quickly closes the distance between them. It blocks Arx's sword with its claws before pushing him away with overwhelming strength. Arx finds the force too powerful to parry and crashes into the ground. Taking advantage of the opening, the shadowy monster immediately rushes toward him for the finishing blow. Arx quickly fires a spell at it, blasting a massive hole through its body. However, the creature begins regenerating almost immediately. Before Arx can recover, it closes the distance and slashes his shoulder. Eleonor cries out Arx's name in worry. The monster then notices her and slowly begins approaching, while Eleonor remains too shocked to move. Just as the creature is about to reach her, Arx strikes it with Grand Blaze, forcing it away from her before positioning himself between Eleonor and the monster. He tells Eleonor to run with the other children while he holds the creature back. However, Arx knows there is no way Eleonor will simply leave him behind. He desperately wonders what he can do. He cannot defeat this monster, but if he attempts to flee with Eleonor and the others, the creature will simply pursue them. Then it suddenly dawns on him. This is the exact place where Eleanor's childhood friend died in the original story. The same fate that he is now about to suffer. Arx wonders whether his death and Eleanor's descent into darkness are unavoidable, no matter how hard he has tried to change the future. As he continues swinging his sword at the shadowy monster, he wonders whether all his efforts have been in vain and whether he is truly going to die without being able to protect her. None of his attacks have any effect on the creature. Instead, it begins laughing at him, sending a shiver down Arx's spine. Suddenly, He hears the children screaming in terror and begging the monster not to come any closer. Arx wonders whether the creature is still controlling the guards. He turns around and sees that his fears are correct. One of the guards is moving toward Eleonor. At that moment, Arx completely forgets about his own safety. There is only one thought in his mind. He has to save Eleonor. He immediately rushes toward her, turning his back on the shadowy monster. As the creature prepares to attack Arx from behind, countless memories of their time together begin flashing through Eleanor's mind. The thought of Arx dying causes her Celestia to surge out of control, overwhelming her emotions until something inside her finally snaps. In an instant, the entire area becomes engulfed by Eleanor's Celestia. The overwhelming power also causes Arx to collapse, leaving him struggling to breathe. He desperately uses wind magic to force air into his lungs before slowly getting back on his feet, barely able to stand as he leans against his sword for support. His eyes widen in shock when he sees the entire area completely consumed by Eleanor's Celestia. More importantly, Arx recognizes this power. It is the same attack Eleonor had used during the final boss battle in the game. Its destructive power is so immense that it is capable of wiping out everything in a single strike. Somehow, Arx has managed to survive. However, there is no time to think about that. He staggers toward Eleonor, slowly making his way through the devastation until he finally manages to get her attention by weakly calling her name. Eleonor immediately runs toward him, but Arx collapses before she can reach him. She catches him and desperately calls his name. Lying on the ground and looking up at her, Arx notices that her eyes have become unnaturally dark, which he assumes is a side effect of her Celestia. More importantly, however, the shadowy monster has somehow survived. Arx watches in horror as its dark form slowly emerges from the ground before beginning to walk toward them. Arx tries to warn Eleonor, but no voice comes out. He wonders whether he should use wind magic to create some distance, but he realizes that in his current condition, he will not be able to cast it in time. Dodging the monster's attack while carrying Eleonor would also be nearly impossible. With no other choice, he decides to do what he has to do. Grabbing Eleanor's hand, he pulls her toward him and spins around, placing himself between her and the monster. The creature's slash, which is aimed at Eleonor, instead strikes Arx directly in the back, inflicting a fatal wound. Eleonor is horrified and repeatedly asks why, insisting that there is no way he can die. She breaks down sobbing while desperately holding his hand. Arx tries to tell her not to cry, but Eleonor points out the enormous amount of blood pouring from his body. Only then does Arx notice that he is completely covered in his own blood. Even in his dazed state, he finds the sight almost unbelievable. Eleonor immediately blames herself for what happened. Arx tries to tell her that it is not her fault, but she firmly insists that it is. She blames herself for using her Celestia and for possessing such a dangerous power, saying that even after Arx was injured, she could not do anything to help him. Arx places a hand against her face and gently reassures her that none of this is her fault. If they had continued fighting the way they were, there was no way he could have defeated the monster. Eleanor's power had undoubtedly changed the situation in their favor and weakened the shadowy creature. Arx finds the situation painfully ironic. He has spent all this time trying to save Eleonor, yet she has ended up saving him instead. At the same time, he fears that he may no longer be able to stop her from falling into darkness. He tells her not to be so hard on herself and promises that he will never let go of her hand. He has no intention of dying here, nor does he intend to push her away or reject the power she possesses. Arx struggles back onto his feet and tells her that there is nothing wrong with her power. Eleonor argues that if she had never used her magic, she would not have hurt him or anyone else. Arx explains that if they had continued dragging out the battle, they probably would have lost, and everyone there might have died. More importantly, he believes that the situation is ultimately his fault. If he had defeated the creature when he first encountered it, none of this would have happened. When Eleonor tries to deny this, Arx insists that he should have become stronger. He believes that if he had started working toward becoming stronger moment he learned about his fate and had simply tried harder, this would never have happened. With a faint smile, He apologizes to Eleanor for being weak and admits that he had been too naive. Eleanor then asks whether he still intends to fight. Arx replies with determination that he will not place any more unpleasant burdens on her. However, he asks her to lend him her strength just this once. If Eleanor were to unleash that overwhelming power again, they might be able to defeat the creature, but in her current state, using that much power would be far too dangerous for her. More than anything, Arx does not want to force her to endure that again. Instead, he decides to bear her burden himself. He believes this is the only way they can defeat the monster. He never wanted to use this option, but if accepting its cost means saving Eleanor, he is willing to do so. Turning toward the shadowy monster, Arx tells it that it really went all out, nearly killing him in the process. With that, he decides that it is time to finish the fight. He unleashes his newly acquired power, Black Widow, and everything suddenly falls into darkness. A few days later, Arx regains consciousness at the Ancinus mansion and finds himself lying in bed covered in bandages. As he tries to sit up, a throbbing pain spreads through his body. He notices his bandaged reflection in the window and realizes just how badly injured he had been. More importantly, Eleanor is sleeping beside him with her head and arm resting against the edge of the bed. As sunlight shines brightly through the window, Arx gently pats her head and thinks that he has made it. 5 years later at the Ancinus mansion, two people are fiercely sparring against each other. One of them eventually knocks the sword from the other's hand. He then places his blade against the disarmed knight's neck, prompting the knight to surrender and admit that his opponent has become much stronger. That opponent is none other than Arx. Another knight watching the sparring match praises Arx for finally defeating the knight commander. 5 years earlier, during the ritual of trials, Arx had used his Celestia against the shadowy monster before apparently losing consciousness and collapsing while drenched in blood, making him appear as though he had died. Fortunately, there had been no fatalities during the incident, and everyone except Arx had suffered only minor injuries. An investigation was conducted afterward, and experts concluded that the shadowy monster had most likely been a ghost formed from the lingering remnants of children who had died in the forest. However, ghosts were generally only capable of possessing children to a limited degree. They should not have been capable of altering memories, brainwashing people, or controlling the knights. Because of the creature's abnormal strength, investigators suspected that someone had enhanced it, leading to a large-scale investigation. In the end, however, no culprit was ever found. Although Arx is fairly certain that the incident had caused the death of Eleanor's childhood friend in the original game, he still cannot be completely certain that the bad ending has been avoided. There is always a chance that another life-threatening incident could occur, so he has continued honing his swordsmanship, magic, and combat tactics more intensely than ever. Just as he is thinking about this, Eleanor suddenly hugs him from behind and asks whether he is hurt anywhere. She is overjoyed when she sees that he appears to be completely fine. Ever since the incident in the forest, Eleanor has become incredibly protective of him, which Arx finds understandable considering how close he had come to dying that day. He thanks her for worrying about him, but asks her to refrain from hugging him in a place like this. Eleanor immediately starts tearing up and asks whether he does not like it when she hugs him. Before Arx can explain that it is not like that, she silences him by placing a finger against his lips. She says that she does not care who sees them and that she does not mind in the slightest. As she continues poking his face, Arx wonders what on earth she is even talking about. She then grabs his hand and begins pulling him away, saying that if he is worried about being seen, they should simply go somewhere where the two of them can be alone. Arx tries to resist, but when he looks toward the other knights for help, they only smile at him as if telling him that he is on his own. Later, in Eleanor's room, she mentions that beautiful flowers are already beginning to bloom in the garden. Arx explains that the gardener had said this year's flowers are his finest work yet. With that in mind, Arx asks Eleanor if she would like to take a walk through the garden. Eleanor finds the proposal very tempting, but she reminds him that she cannot today. She has immobilized him with her Celestia, and is sitting on top of him as she reminds him that today is supposed to be the day she keeps him safe from every possible danger. She also recalls how they had agreed to set aside one day each week to spend the entire day together from beginning to end. However, to her frustration, the moment she took her eyes off him, Ark slipped away to train. He cannot deny it and averts his gaze. He apologizes, explaining that he becomes restless if he does not keep himself active. Eleanor says that she has no problem with his dedication to training, but he should also keep the promises he makes to her. She then asks whether the spot where he was struck earlier still hurts. Ark replies that the blow only grazed him and that it is nothing serious. However, Eleanor continues staring at him for a while, leaving Ark increasingly aware of just how close she is. She tells him how relieved and grateful she is that he was not injured, but Ark says that she is overreacting because it was only a sparring match. Eleanor then admits that she would not be able to bear it if something happened to him. At the same time, she understands that the two of them cannot stay together 24 hours a day. Hearing this, Ark asks if she can release his restraints, promising that he will not run away again. Eleanor refuses, reminding him that he made the same promise last time and still ran away. Ark internally understands why he has no choice but to put up with this situation, and it is connected to his unique magic. His ability allows him to copy another person's Celestia. In other words, he can replicate and freely use the unique magic possessed by other people. When he first learned about this ability, he thought it was incredibly overpowered. However, it came with a fatal drawback. Whenever Ark copies a person's Celestia, he becomes significantly weaker against that same type of magic. For example, if he copies even a simple fire spell and is later hit by the original magic, even a weak flame can engulf his entire body. In other words, when he used Eleanor's innate magic to defeat the shadowy ghost during the ritual of trials, he inadvertently made himself almost completely powerless against her Celestia. Ark then reminds Eleanor that they will soon be enrolling in the academy and suggests that she should refrain from doing things like this. 5 years have passed since the forest incident, and both Ark and Eleanor are now 15 years old, the exact age at which the story of the otome game Celestia Kingdom begins. Eleanor explains that this is precisely why she is doing this. Once they start attending the academy, the amount of time they can spend together will inevitably decrease, so she wants to make the most of their remaining time together. Her behavior reminds Ark that her overprotectiveness is not the only thing that has changed since that day. His relationship with her has also begun to change. Eleanor then tells him that if there are any troublemakers at the academy whom he cannot handle himself, he should make sure to tell her. She declares that she will not forgive anyone who disturbs their peaceful life, regardless of who they are. Watching her behave this way, Ark wonders whether she has already begun to fall into darkness. He cannot shake the feeling that as things stand, he has become someone who must never die under any circumstances. With an anomaly like him now standing beside her, the story moves on to the next stage of the otome game, Celestial Kingdom.